Chedan Dorjee Chonan Lai Janjo Bado Dane Gyaltsen Dhargye Chujun Jebe Sonam Jen Dola Benje Sanje Dobara Chedan Dorjee Chonan Lai Janjo Bado Dane Gyaltsen Dhargye Chujun Jebe Sonam Jen Dola Benje Sanje Dobara Dorjee Chonan Lai Janjo Bado Dane Gyaltsen Dhargye Chujun Jebe Sonam Dola Benje Sanje Dobara I want to remind all of ourselves to take a moment and cultivate bodhicitta, or the altruistic motivation, seeking complete enlightenment for the benefit of all other sentient beings. And with that kind of contrived altruistic motivation, that we should all participate in this Dharma discourse on understanding mind and awareness.
That is karsa, this sinja shuyatela, any karsa, the Lorig Namsha, or the Desi karsa, you do Shani Yaboyas, Ganga Sedu, the Tishin, Lorig Namsha, the share is.
The teaching which I haven't requested, to give is on science of mind in the Nalanda tradition of Tibetan Buddhism, and so I will be happy to give a short teaching on what we call Lorig, science of mind, or mind and awareness.
Oh, that choosing is a chulu to the Ganga, any karsa. They do Ganga Lug Zoshing is Jada, nonsense Zoshing in Shetina, do the Washada. Tanganzo Nambasea Dishena, and a karsa, same Zoshin, and it. So they do Ganga Zawa to the same Disha. That Lunga going to Yodi or so same Shawar was it that. The Hindu that should know Dharma, Tiaganga, Fijita, Yamata, Beshan English, should do not Togi Dangasia show it. That part relation telemanga, the Tizoganga, Mendama, the Ganga, any Dunga Ganga, the Lulu of the country, Jupaji of Sikota. Same on Yao, you in the Kondumunzi or Marcella, dear. In the Kayi Lukona be Shartse and the Karsa, Jamal Sanam, the Lapa Shadway, sort of Luke, Luka to Konogoni, and it is in Sidan Shiva, or this you worry. So that number Sanji will take two the Lumari in the same reason, in the same song, said that same news to the Sidan Chia location was shower, what should I put that Dedu Ganga so the younger doing the Karsina machine, young Roman Shiagda, Karsa, do you hear of the same issue in the same needs with the Hakwa, but teachers that in that the Kaluri Namsha, dead Shana Kanjida, saying Lomisha, Ishing, my didn't sing Namsha, dead the Shana, and Yabor, said the Geshe is.
Let me take a moment to contextualize the importance of studying mind and awareness in the Buddhist path and practice. In general, we could say that when we think of different types of religions of faith, there are certain faiths. They seem to focus more on, body as the kind of main basis or the source of suffering and happiness. For example, in the Hinduism, Hinduism has a lot of what we call sub-traditions, and usually we talk about 5 of them, 5 different, if you like, philosophical standpoints on in Hinduism, and all of them, they seem to focus more on the body as the main, source of happiness and suffering. And so in order to find moksha or liberation, so they would recommend, if you will, to engage in a practice which basically involves putting your body through hardships, that you might have to be brave enough to jump on the trident, as that way, or that you will put your body through trials and tribulations and hardships, so that through that you will purify your negativities, and then you can attain your spiritual goals. But in Buddhism, of course, we understand that body and mind are intimately connected, but it's not so much the body that is the source of suffering and happiness. It is the mind, chitta, which is the primary source of happiness and suffering. So when we think in terms of our actions of body, speech, and mind, of course, actions of body and speech do matter, but what matters most is the actions of mind. So whether we would, like to find, better, rebirths and higher attainments, or whether we don't mind to stay in problematic situations, or even kind of get into the worst situations, what really can help us to, achieve all of those things is our mind. So therefore, for our own practice and spiritual development, it is very important for us to understand, what mind is. In other words, to educate ourselves about the science of the mind, and what is it, what is its nature, what is its characteristics, what are different types of mind, and what are their functions, and so forth. And of course, in the monastic universities, monks, they go into every details to be able to understand and investigate what mind is. But of course, we won't be able to do the same thing here. But that being said, we can still be able to engage in the exploration and understanding of mind and awareness. So that's the reason why, I have been asked to give this teaching, and I decided to give this short teaching on understanding mind. Of course, Buddhist studies are very extensive and profound, and in the monastic universities, our monastic scholars they engage in in-depth study of epistemology, logical reasoning, and through debate process, so they get into all the fine details investigations of different topics in Buddhist studies, including the mind. And of course, in those of us who are outside the monastic study of curriculum or environment, or in other words, we are not monks, lay people trying to live your ordinary life, so we may not be able to engage in the same kind of study like as monastic scholars do, but we can also still study and practice Dharma. And of course, among all kinds of texts and treatises, perhaps the most practical guide for us is the Lamrim, Stages of the Path to Enlightenment treatise. So we have really, studied the great Lamrim, great exposition on the stage of path to enlightenment by Manjushri Lama Tsongkhapa. There are many other types of Lamrim texts as well. Some are shorter than the others, some are more extensive. So in a sense, there's nothing kind of new to talk about that's not already in the Lamrim treatises, because Lamrim talks about the paths that we can cultivate and progress on the paths and grounds. But that being said, sometimes when we go to the same teaching, one of the issues we face is that after we study something, then we forget a lot of the things. So if we forget things, then of course it is less benefit to us. Or that sometimes, maybe sometimes if you don't have enough enthusiasm to pursue the study and practice Dharma, we might get bored, like, well, I have heard the Lamrim so many times. As soon as the teaching starts, so Lamrim, we're like, well, I kind of heard that before. I know what it is like, So we get into that kind of mindset, so kind of to kind of complement our Lamrim study and practice, perhaps that's the big reason why we study mind, because understanding mind and its nature is pertinent to our Lamrim study and practice. Basically, Lamrim guide is to be able to improve our state of the mind and to be able to cultivate paths and grounds leading to enlightenment. So in that way, maybe some of the things we learn about the mind, its nature, that could be more interesting and new kind of information we would like that could complement the Lamrim study and practice in that way. So it is a very complementary discourse related to Lamrim study and practice.
In this case, the Shava choosing said. Chidani the peasant to repeat Namja Gagata and that I lot of royalty. So Lloyd saying the Taya Namja Karsati, Tadi Lorig say, of course, Chen could say you so the negative shape, say your mother, the Shava choosing. Then the lots of nation of Golomon story, what take it under. In Dutrasia, the Lorig Tayu says, Ganga Tango Sways of the any Shaba choosing shed. What I did mine is such a page, there of share. She did my end the name of Tarsha share. In Otuzma, you want that and then Yek the Lorig Tayu Naga said, Dutrasia, Dujito on the pure side of Tarsha Josochi. Jagali on a daily give Samarua.
Let me say a few words about the origin of, we call the study of science of the mind, we call Lorig, science of mind and awareness, and related to the science of reasoning, Dhargye. Of course, in the Buddhist treatises or Shastras, all the subject matters have been dealt with. But in Tibet, one of the great disciples of Lhasa, Translator London Sheriff, was great master Chaba Shujisenge, and he was the one who in Tibet started to kind of author what we call Duda, collected topics of debate, and also the science of the mind, the science of reasoning, And because those things are somehow, if you will, very much extensively dealt with in the treatises, but he kind of extracted them, and so that it's much easier to focus on each of them. And so when we think in terms of debate and logic, so it kind of goes back to this great master Chaba Choje Singye. So he kind of extracted things out of Pramana, Vartika, or exposition of valid cognitions, and it's put together as a collected topics and so forth. And after that, great Sakya Pandita, he also started to author works on epistemology, and this is how the debate system flourished in Tibet. So the reason I'm saying these things is this is something happened in Tibet. So these things could not be found exactly in India at the time, because of much later time developed system in Tibet proper.
What is it?
And of course, over the time, other great masters such as Kunchen Jamyang Lotu and Radha, Dura is very famous for collected topics according to Radha tradition. So all those things came into being, and the text that we're going to use today was composed by from Lhasa Ling Monastic University, Geshe Gyeltsen, who was also referred to as Yerung Khensur, a former abbot of the Yerung. So this was written much later time, after we kind of lost our country and we came into India in exile. And so he's kind of my generation. So of course he's no more, already passed away, but he wrote this text on understanding mind. Those of you who have this mind training in Tibetan Buddhism, on the cover says Lati Rinpoche and Elizabeth Neighbor, okay, but that's the English title on the modern book. It has two parts. The part 2, starting on page 44, is where right on the top, the root text has been presented in small prints or small fonts, and Lati Rinpoche's commentary in a bigger font. This is how you can differentiate between the root text that Geshe is using and Lati Rinpoche's commentary. So it opens with one stanza that is what called salutation to Manjushri Lama Tsongkhapa, and it also serves as the pledge of composition, right? If you think in terms of classic Tibetan writings, there is a salutation to holy beings, and that is a pledge of composition. We call Choje and Sombar Dhamchaba. So that one stanza, it combines those two features together.
What did Karsa teach? Tajida the Choje the Sombar Taba Yunge Minge Nazo Jordishana, Kono Guba Dela, Chuba Juatelia, and so the negative. That nigga some sugar in the draggy, Julgo and Gom Karsa, Shebed of Karsigana, or did Tarsiavia, the song say at Tonda is or was Shevas Giadi. In the Zomba Tamsa, Kadas and Shawa, the Picket touching out. And Kaji Zumdo said to the Mabudua, so that basically someone goes to the shot if Smarson or Tita Masomba. any way to shake the Kasi, the Shazan Juya, Tondala, and Zumba Tamja, she was. Her Zumba Tamja said, I want to teach you. Maybe Temple, some of you detect enough. In the Misa, Kayla, she was Casey Kayla, in the Komajava, she was. That may but was just in the Kale, very good, good to ask Kayama. She's the way I was the Kale level. Kale answered the Zumba Dogma in touching our detect we well then in the Zumba Tamja series.
So on page 44, right on the top, that one stanza reads, having bowed down to the glorious Lobsang Thakpa, emanation of Manju Gosha, treasury of wisdom, I extend this presentation of awareness and knowledge, composite of all important points, in order to increase the clarity of knowledge of those with low intelligence, unquote. So as Geshe said, that in many classic writings, so we have those features such as salutation, choba. Not that every text would necessarily have it, but many do. So the purpose of salutation is to be able to what we call accumulate merit, so that you will be able to fulfill your goals. And the pledge of composition, Sombar Damjava, is the commitment. That basically once you start a project, whatever it is, that you will bring it to completion, fulfill it. And because otherwise we know that people can start off writing something and then they never complete it. So everything is left unfinished or incomplete. So you don't want to do that. So at the beginning, when you write a pledge of composition, you said, once I start it, I'm going to complete it. So that's the purpose of pledge of composition or Tsombar Tham Chawa. And as a matter of fact, we are saying that people with integrity, they may not agree to do a lot of things, but once they agree, their promise or pledge is good, that they will fulfill it. Whereas, many other people, they seem to agree with you to do, okay, I'll do it for you, and then they never do it. Or I'll do it for you, right? They're very easy to agree, and then they really don't feel like they have to complete it. But that's not the case with, those with integrity, that once they pledge it, they will complete or fulfill their pledge.
Oh, that's what you do. Can't you do like any yondes yoga or what? Couldn't do yondes yoga. So that the Jeremy, we say, couldn't do yondes. I guess I mean, Lotus was it. Because Jeremy was it in Jamaican good to us. The Jamaican to us as hotel charging in Sajira. She said, did I share the Curtis and Timothy with Yodem and was it the Gonzo Takarsa Lama to bet. People have a ganga, chick ganga, you know, Marty on the Geshe here, that's patient Buvel who did it. Jaga didn't die any go to say that spent it as a ganga chick, two at the Siajim.
No, sir.
Didn't have Gumjan, Kali Jan Yasanji Siajim, didn't Mark on Siajim. That was the prevalent patient ganga in the market there. We didn't call it Yadu, which is not Yomara. No. That Jeremy, any exaggeration, she was the patient of Watrana Yori. That is the Ijiri. In a mark too, we did the Akali Jackson, who decades of the Americans. Was the Pube Garza, Yamulusu, that Pube, Teva of Shibotia, did a Yana to the Gira, yet did a go with the Kadu Chaki the Jeremy said, in up and the Jeremy said, and the corner took the bed, the took the bed. To do some of the Shibu, Halley, a Bishanda Mendashi, and the Tozu goes to Tarsi, and long years, the direction she did, the rebut of the Yas, she and the Tado, the Yagars do. No. Kokali Jan Yad Dodi. No. The Sheta, the director came here, she said that the Trubadi said the Sheta, this prevail with the Shagwa, I think I did. Timtan Gishik, Timtan Sugar, Gishik came at the Sewer. Lama the dangerous she with Chimbo to the Ganga. In the martyr, in the Yasamato, the simple child. That didn't talk about Mata to me, Kali and the Adria may have to Sanji. Simple child, Ningatus. No, sir. That didn't Yakale can win it, didn't have a Kayo, Yakale, Yashin is in it. No, so the Takale to Poja. The Yakanga in him appears that the sort of power shelters. No, it's the tongue water to that. No, that is the Yakale and the Yama took Logic to the Lia, Society don't do something. So the purpose of Chögyö salutation is that you will sing praises of the qualities of the objects of refuge or the holy beings, and you honor them by kind of reflecting on their qualities. That's the purpose of salutation, and that helps you to accumulate a lot of merit. And here, of course, there is not much really mention of qualities, except that we know that Lobsang Dhargye, which is the name of the Geshe Rinpoche, is an emanation of Manju Gosha, so Manju Shiri. Okay? So as Geshe is kind of chuckling over this, when you look at this salutation, this looks like a very Tibetan kind of way of doing salutation. Almost every, I think, Tibetan writings, when you look at the salutations or the biographies or the autobiographies, so forth, what we find in salutation is as if the Lama or the person that we honor is an emanation of somebody. It's almost like a holy being has manifested in some other forms, and then we, for maybe Tibetan, that works, right, to be able to develop a faith in these, masters. But when we look in the Indian writings, they seem to do it very differently, right? For example, in India, I don't think anybody really talked about, like Nagarjuna being an emanation of some other, enlightened being or something, or for that matter, right? And but in India, what they do is how, these great masters, in the beginning, they were very simple and humble, ordinary, and then they work hard to study, to practice, and then they become highly learned scholars and realized masters. That is the approach that India's tradition seems to follow, and maybe that is in some sense, very inspiring, isn't it? When we know that, somebody, even these great masters, in the beginning, they were just like us. They were struggling with things. They have dealt with a lot of difficulties, in their study and practice. And they overcame all of those things through their patience and knowledge and all of those things, and then they become somebody. So we feel that, well, maybe someday I can be the same too, right? Because we are all starting at the same point, Whereas when we think that, all the great masters, the emanation of somebody, then it looks like, well, I'm not an emanation of anybody, so maybe I don't have that much hope, because I'm the one starting from kind of a gecko, and so that could be uninspiring sometimes, And Geshe said he know of some even good scholars. They said that when we look at the Tibetan salutations, sometimes it's a bit uninspiring, because everybody we honor are emanations of somebody, and then I feel like, well, I'm nobody, so it's kind of uninspiring. Can I become like them? But when you look at the salutations in the works of Indian masters, so it's like we know that in the beginning, they are ordinary like us, and then they went through all the hardships and struggles and go through the study and practice, and then they become somebody. So that's more inspiring in some sense, But if I say like that, I feel that's true. But then sometimes people, they don't hear the real message. They hear what they want to hear. They think like, well, you're being big mouth, bad-mouthing some other people. So that's not criticizing someone. We're just simply seeing, what seems the distinctions in terms of how we do salutations in the Tibetan works and the Indian works, and which seems to be more inspiring, right? At least from my point of view. Jiddu mela data about the Guji Chigri said, Reserva. Yours a Karsana di that rooms and the Logis are busy shouldn't degree. The Amdul Balingama, Goga does the Nam Chamboshe, any thing shut up the Yamars that Lojo Shinge and so ringni to love get that into a Tamjashawa Gomashana doing so there was in Dosho or
No.
said that Tashi get Laraji Tavat Pesa Yard Niman
No.
and Gomachu my Karda Zoma da Dinah the Gomachi Tamjasha Visa.
No, sir.
In the Konza Zomo Shomata do a bed, sitting in Google. You that get some Tamjasha or Tamjashan. And true don't do Jilia, tell you some year my trade the shin. And the question saying the Desha because the Millar Shaizer.
No.
She said Millar in the Gujarat, she was soon on Millar. But then the water could you say, you
No, sir.
what the long time sometimes users, what did the when they call it Jantan to Yonja, did the Mela sending a Zamin Gage two attended that Milati when it is a easy sure.
No.
But these are the rate, is not you have to pay 2 more version of the resident, daughter was Kuji. Daughter of Kuji, she was Dudo shooting him on the theater.
That was.
She had said to you, Sanjay, it is a daughter.
That
She the things are to be. She has shall what did so that she was so ashamed that give out that the Gomo gets it to runners that the Pejaki, what did not so Pejaki do? Particularly, what did don't of the songs.
No, sir. No, sir. So what I said earlier is that in almost all salutations in the works of the Tibetan masters, we honor, our objects of refuge, gurus, Buddhas. And we kind of see them as emanations of, more realized beings. But there could be a few exceptions. Like one exception is the story of great yogi Milarepa of the 11th century, right? And the story that is very popular and probably is how Milarepa went through all kinds of trials and tribulations, hardships, and so finally, he became Buddha in one lifetime. So that's the inspiring story about Milarepa, who was nobody in the beginning, went through kind of hell, if you will, and then finally he became an enlightened being. And that becomes very inspiring for millions of people. But at the same time, there's another perspective on Milarepa's story, that he was not an ordinary person. Actually, he was an emanation of great Indian master Chandrakirti. Yeah, I think it's somewhere mentioned in the work of Kunjen Jamyasheba, a great master scholar there. And if he were an emanation of Chandrakirti, then he was already highly realized, isn't it? But then if we say that he became Buddha in one lifetime, well, of course, kind of thing. So there are different perspectives to look at things, and what one might find is inspiring or not so inspiring. And so that's kind of funny story about Milarepa related to that is said that in the northeastern part of Tibet called Amdo province, right, there's the famous Amdo Trashiki monastery where the studies are very good and they study debate and metaphysics and all of that. Then sometimes during winter it's too cold and they seem to kind of travel to other monasteries, and one time there's 2 monk scholars from the Amdo Trashiki went to a nearby small kind of monastery where there are few monks, but they are really not into study of the debate, things like that. But they have to take care of their own livelihood. So, they have to go and take care of the she-yaks and animals we call zo, because yak is a male, so you can't milk them. So that's funny in the West, yak gives milk. But she-yak, we call zo. So they will go and milk the she-yak, and it took quite an hour or 2, and they had to wait. So kind of those 2 monks got a little bit kind of impatient, and then finally they were able to sit and have a kind of a discussion or debate. And of course, the 2 monks from the Trashiki monastery, because they have learned the debate much better, so they thought they might be able to win, like the discussion debate here. But the monks here gave them a hard time. They said, you really don't have to necessarily kind of get into all the details of the debate. He said, what about Milarepa? Milarepa didn't study debate. Probably he was clueless about debate. But he's the one who became enlightened in one lifetime. So they kind of used Milarepa as kind of example, evidence to say that debates is not all in everything. It's good, but not all in everything. So it said that they had a hard time, and so actually they lost the debate that day. And so it's kind of interesting to look at a story like that, that Milarepa, the story that we know is an ordinary person, did a lot of bad things in the beginning, went through the hell, hardship, and finally became Buddha in one lifetime. But then there's another perspective where it said that he is an emanation of a great Indian master Chandrakirti. So we have to kind of look at things from different perspectives and sort out whatever we find it inspiring or and so forth.
Any Jambian, any Namdu, Jambian, Diogarsena, Jambian, Gelon, Dorjee, so the Chombo say, Start Jambians, it done that, you don't sound yes, Sangishi, so that she does Sasham the river. No, the Sasham River, the Shena Jerem was a grand in the Tuzum Lonia, in the part of San Jena, Sasham, whatever, Chimban of Jiratago, Jambian, was that.
So, of course, in the salutation, usually we might enumerate the kind of great qualities of body, speech, and mind of, a holy being or whoever we are honoring. And here, the only thing mentioned is the glorious Lobsang Thakpa, Rinpoche, an emanation of Manju Gosha. Manju Gosha is same as Manju Shri, So emanation means that Manju Shri himself appeared in the form of a monk, right, called Lobsang Thakpa, Rinpoche. Okay? And so of course Manju Shri is already enlightened, isn't it? So therefore, if Manju Shri himself appeared as in the form of Lama Tsongkhapa, well then Lama Tsongkhapa has to be really holy and enlightened, right? So that's one way to look at it, and that could be inspiring to many. But the other story of Lama Tsongkhapa is that, Lama Tsongkhapa had an ordinary life story. He was born in northeastern Tibet. He went through, the life's, situations. He studied, right? And finally, we said that in the intermediate Pardo state, right, Lama Tsongkhapa attained, Buddhahood. Well, even as an ordinary person, he started his life, and in the intermediate part of the state, he became Buddha. So anyway, he's already Buddha, right? So that story could be, again, a different story, but it could be inspiring to us as well, Well,
there is a Jidang going to do that, going to be Lama Town to Ganga, Tribashida Shido, Tati Tribasa, the Gaje, Sheva Shigi to the she does on the wall, busy, they wish to show me at all.
No, so no.
Did you say this? The Marit is over, and Jerry was jumping over Marit is over. You know, that shit on your
So, Geshe-la's chuckling over the same thing related to that salutation. When we say that Lama Tsongkhapa is an emanation Manju Shri, of course we believe that. There's nothing wrong with that. That could be inspiring to us. But then for some people, when they think critically, then that's uninspiring. They're like, well, he's already enlightened being, right, manifesting here. So what about me? I'm just an ordinary person. What chances do I have to become like him? Whereas if you look at the Lama Tsongkhapa's ordinary life story, that he was born in northeastern part of Tibet, then he went through the studies, then he went through all the practices, right? And then he became a great master, and then he became enlightened in the Partho state, intermediate. Well, that's very inspiring too. But that's true as well, isn't it? So that's why Geshe is saying, so it's up to us, what kind of story or aspect of Lama Tsongkhapa we find it more inspiring. So I'm not saying, contesting that Lama Tsongkhapa is not emanation of Manju Shri. That may well be true. Yeah, but I'm saying is that for some people, critical thinker, they find this a little bit uninspiring because they want a story that speaks to them. Right? In the beginning, Lama Tsongkhapa was ordinary like you or me, and then went through hardships, then become somebody, then become enlightened being. Right? That's more inspiring rather than that he's already an emanation of somebody, and then you feel like, okay, who am I now?
자 telling Lorig 남자 쉐발로 숨시.
No.
사지를 좀 생이셔야 되시는 다코랑 오늘 장사 가져야지. 그게 락게르 소디 누가 그러다 그게 메노 따르 생이 되지. 근데 이야와 로가가 도도지 뭐라 로 농지 뭐라 봐. 이야와시. 근데 이야와 소소 동시에 봐세. 이야와 힘도다 문자를 로 문자에도 소소도 무엇이야지로 봐. 대신에 근데 샤와스도 동시에 봐서 사지를 신 손는 누구도 봐.
So now we are on page 45, right on the top. What follows after that one stanza, salutation and pledge of composition, is so what is this text all about? Well, this text is about Lorig, science of the mind, or mind and awareness, and it's presented under three main headings. Tsinyi, definition. Definition means what is mind exactly? How should we understand it? What is its characteristics? That's what the defining characteristic of mind. And Yewa, what are the different types of mind? Mind is just not one thing, right? It's a world in itself. There are different types of mind, different divisions of mind. Okay? And then the third point is, if there are many different types of mind, then how are they different from one another? So we have to deal with the meaning of every different kind or type of mind. So therefore, Lorig, science of the mind, is presented under 3 points: definition, types or divisions, and explication of each type or division.
다 세기리가 히베스인데 다 리과다 히바 찍바데레디 노자르시는 세기시디자 히바코로 무 세자 용게 세가 다 속소리 페무소리는 율주가 용어로 와 그러다 디레 뭐예요 율주가 네바 세게 세베랑 히베인자 아니 그 이메 멤버 세어나 이 디레 말을 세세 디 세세 당자 히고로 와 그거 당자에다 당이 쓰리고 지를 아니 그 세기리와디 히바스는 뒤이지. 지단 릭바드 히바인 동식으로 와. 어디 레드레디 독자 고동레는 것도 지면다 너희 고동식으로 와.
So on page 45, right on the top, I'll read how it has been translated here, and then I might do similar or little different translations. So you have all the options here. The definition of an awareness is a knower. So in Tibetan it says Rikpa Lo Tsenyi. In other words, a defining characteristic of mind is awareness. Okay, mind is awareness. Okay, and the definition of consciousness is that which is clear and knowing, in the text translated. So consciousness, or Nambrashava in Tibetan, is defined as that which has clarity, subjective clarity, and that which is cognitive or knowing. Okay. Now, of course, we regard Lo and Sheba, or mind and consciousness, as synonyms. Okay, and so that clarity here means that the mind has this luminosity characteristic or subjective clarity, because mind is something that can engage with objects. Matter cannot engage with objects. Mind is subjective experience, so therefore it can engage, its object, Gelugpa in Tibetan, and so it has this subjective clarity because it can, the object can reflect on it. Just like when we say that when the sun shines, it dispels the darkness, right? In the same way, the mind has this luminosity characteristic, that is part of the subjective mind. Subjective mind.
Oh, dear, that did some shit. That's also don't because Yawas said, Yawa tell that image. Lord was don't you see, but Yaw some Lord Buddha, you do that. Lord Munda, Lord Nalia, Gaga chicks you almost said that he so you that Zindan. Get on the Gaga Kaya, so that you do the Karsa. Yeah, you do some. Do the yes, that so she laid a Ganga Jipa, ko dea deva do shin dun chi go ra da an karsa dun de ya lo som de ya tele chi de na en som na ga de ya som na lo ga ga shi ba ga ga di de ji she en lo ni si ya de ni na le ye go ni na de shi o de ga ga lo ga ga ti na do go de shin de ye da men da ji ro o de ye go som she da tang bo yu da ye bre de mu som ene sido mu som se de ga se na de si wa da ga je ko na ka du la ene yu ji ke de na da da so do me so to na so ji ma de ba le ko mi ji ya yo ma ro de na ji da me na ji ya ma ro de de ji ka du li yu pe mo bo de ken ke de go som si ji si wo ro da de je wa se da ngo de na ji ju de go de she ya de she wa de je wa se da de mang xue ju ji de da de tang bu lo ji dang de she da de nong zo ma ye ne da ngo som je wa de gang ge nang lo ye de ji xi se ya ji go ji xi se ya de ga se na an tang bu tong ma xie ba ma ye ba de bi tang bu xie de na ma ji ben ji ya yu zhe bu ji de ji xi se go ro ene ji xi se da yi ju se ya de ga se na yi ju se ya de ko ra ji de de yin ji de sa wei wen zha sa ji su ju zhe se me se kai me ne su ce de zhe ji le se ya de de ta ma ji se me ma zhe ene ko xin zhe lo ma ye ba de de ji la yi ju se go ro de lo ru di yo so de se go de da na la ma ye se na de se go ri ka sa yu to la yi ji me ji ene tema ta ji ko na mi tema de mi gen de gen som zu go da ga ji ma je da na la ma ye se de tema ta ji se de so so sam lo de ying de na ene mi hi ge bi ge pe do so da ji mo ji da ye re ji ying de na en di de wa mi de ngo she wa de chi na pe na me ma do so cha go wa se da di ji da ga ka sa ko tema ta ji de sem zu de be dal nyen de za ene ko me gi tong go de tong na re sa zu je to go ma wa se da na la ma ngi sa pe me do go de wa ene da ka sa na la ma ngi ba she da te zu na ga de te zu ma go ya da te zu da ga ha go ra chi in da me na ka re na sa ya ji su lo do ro ko ma ko ma di me do sa ma mo ja yo ro te da ji xi se de te lo tong du ji da di ji sa de da da de xie da zhe de da tang bo dong ge ma ye ba na ma yu tu de dong ge zhe ji xi se go是吧可是那la ma ge ji al te zu ro te zu se de zang de yu da da de xie yu yu si o da xi le zhe go de xie la
lo xie
xi可是这种路就得那个路西是那西热路些，这种是那西热路上过嘛是吧？这种上这个是吧？但路西是得被路修的的，那感觉老人能他妈这个的是吧
？So what Geshe is explaining is on page 48. You have so mind can be classified into 7 types, or 3 types, or 2 types of mind. Okay, 7 types is the extensive typology of mind, or divisions of mind, and they can be subsumed within 3 types of mind, or threefold mind typology, and that can be subsumed within 2 types of mind. Okay, so the 7 types of mind. Now we are dealing with the divisions of mind. As we said, mind is not one thing only, it's a world in itself. There are different types of mind. And so the first one is called Ngunsum in Tibetan, which means direct perception or direct cognition. So this is the kind of a perception where, for example, when there is a visible form in front of you, it generates your visual consciousness, perception. Right, because that form, or if there's a sound, it generates your auditory perception. So this is basically a direct perception. If there is, an object in front of it, so to speak, it generates that particular perception. Yeah, and so that's one kind of mind that we have. The another one is called Cheba, inferential perception or cognition. Inferential means that we depend upon some kind of inference or reasoning, right? I think every day we experience a lot of those types of inferential cognitions. Based upon this and that, we think that maybe this is what it is, you know. So that's another kind of a mind. Then the third one is called Geshe, which means subsequent cognition or perception. This means that you have already perceived something. It is the subsequent moment that still remembers, right? What has been, viewed or perceived. So it's a continuity of the previous moment. That's a subsequent cognition or Geshe. Then there is the Yizhe, which is translated as a correct assumption. We don't know for sure, but we assume this may be so, and that happens to be correct one. It's not incorrect. Okay, so that's a Yizhe. And then the fifth one is called Nala Mange, and so here translated as appearance without ascertainment. Now the latest translation is called indeterminate cognition or perception. So this is the kind of perception where, let's say you are completely enjoying a music that you like. Maybe your friend kind of passed by in front of you, but you did not recognize your friend because your mind is completely, right, absorbed into the music or distracted by the music. So even though your friend passed by, you just even did not notice, right? So that's an indeterminate perception. What's happening is for a perception of consciousness arise, it depends upon three essential conditions. So one of the essential conditions is called Temathaken, immediately preceding condition. Translating here, okay, that next explanation, I know that, okay, but so that's the fifth kind of mind. Now the sixth one is called doubt, right? That we all know, right? We have doubt over that. Oh, maybe that's the person who stole my thing, or maybe not, or maybe it looks like one. I don't know. So we have so many doubts, right, every day. So that's another category of mind. And the last one is called Logshe, wrong or distorted perception. So this is the worst among all the cognitions, right? Because it's completely engaged in its object distortedly. So, so there are all kinds of distortions. So that is the typology, seven kinds of mind typology. I'll run through the list first. Direct perception or cognition, inferential perception or cognition, subsequent perception or cognition, correct assumption, indeterminate cognition or perception, doubt, and distorted perception or cognition.
Oh, that doing the that Chava choosing Chava Karzadi choosing that's the have the doing that did not the Sabe the Yiju said Shagman, Yiju said Tesman City, no Joe Shagdua.
No, so.
No Joe Shag that the Ningmagi and then John me want to you get Chok Shagdu. The Yiju the Shago, Yiju said Shagman, Yiju Tesman to us about Joe Shagdua. No, so. The Gonzo the doing Shago, the Shabash is in the sheet, the Insha. Gonzo Ganga Chastan Jigwa, the Insha Jigwa. No, but there is that the Yiju the concept Tesman Faju Chokawaji, that's it on the Simpsons the cow shoot. No, sir. So, what are they don't see the I don't know, sir. Should I jato the war? No, sir. Or did I say that the Gonzo when the young are do? No, sir. So that this is that the Shangju said the English was your. No. This was that Tesman don't go to see what you have to Tesmara. No, sir. Tesman drive, that was the Gaga Fari. Sir. That's the issue why that Tesman don't go. No, sir. Shangju said the English Tesman did this and your diary. No, sir. That they could have wanted to share their younger. No, sir. So we just kind of listed, briefly identified a typology of 7 types of mind. And this is according to the master Chaba Chuji Singye. But like say, for example, Sakya Pandita, from the Sakya tradition, so they would only talk about 6 types of mind, and they would subsume
correct assumption yichi with doubt, okay, Tezom. And I think Nyingmas also do the same thing with the great master Jumipamba, where they also kind of include the correct assumption with a doubt. Okay? But then, it's kind of problematic. Geshe is checking over this because he witnessed this kind of discussion at the Central Tibetan Institute University in Sarnath, where when you debate with them, then they find it very hard to hold their position that correct assumption is a doubt. Because what includes in the correct assumptions are, for example, great compassion and bodhicitta. So if you include great compassion and bodhicitta as doubts, well, now we've got a problem already, right? So when you have a debate and discussion, they find it very hard to defend their position. But in terms of classification, so they would subsume correct assumption or yichi into doubt.
And tell us, show us don't say what did it. That don't be a tell in show us don't share us. No. Don't push Cursa. Somebody show yours don't do. Don't go some share while let's say that wasn't said because saying you are thinking the jig by share. No. And saying the teacher that Tombo your knees, saying your knees, that saying the wasn't saying Curson. Talk about the Mauduri wasn't saying is. Talk about the taking Mauduri was talk about the on to see Ray Mari needs the body inside my say, causing on to Yali the same bed, Tendo the Gagatopa cigarette. Did you remember here? For a cattle brigade, she got to Java the word was power using the tail design the shadow with the Muslim cigarette. But this Topa taste this water. The Koya. And you the treaty Magia, when the Janzini hit that turned the Marva. No. And Sunzi me hit there, got so toned me is Naguna, Sunzi me Marva. You call you the chain. She would tell her, talk about her, you two your number gave. That Topa said, you go so fast, I young into a career, no one knows the party to Sophia. But the Topa so Topa Maduri, but the Gozum singing is. That Toba J. Madu Sad Miller Ripa wasn't semi-singing, he said. That Toba J. Madu Sad Miller said, the Sad Miller said the Carisna Ronjiva Menje Dege, Samuel Sad Miller Ripa said Gorsu. No, that take you a Sad Miller Ripa Gomers Miller Ripa in the degree. No, that Shams. Ronju, that same of the daughter was the Kuno, she know the yacht did he or said the Toba Matu Sad Miller Carsa wasn't semi singing, that Muslim Ganga, the Muslim Semas the Shark of Sadawa, Muslim Shark of Museum, so the Muslim Semas the Shark of quite that she didn't was semi singing. Tell almost Yungus, Roger said that Roger said. The tenure de what you already that the dot de what that Ronju mentioned the Roger was Sharawa. That Nenjo was say Shidua. The tenure lose in the Roger was said Yomari. The Shadadi Yarwa. No, so she said that the almost said because nobody but it wasn't saying that wasn't the Cadres, that wasn't there. The most chicks were Dodo Maris. No, so. She said, Rang tomorrow, Dhargye, almost reasonable then gave over to Maduro, because only things, almost the Dagon, Sunzian, Dajian, Tizian, any cars, Richard almost Tizian, Togar, Nayarwa. Or to get the country, Dakota, then they almost solo share, Toda, get on Jiwari, for you change, couldn't Jam, you have been Chidowina, Chizani, and the Cotizian with you, Marva. No. What is it? What she lego do, Shiranita, karsa yena sunjiang karsa janjiang chenjiang runjiang rigjaje wang de nga yes rigjaje basena ngadu lushi de ro 두어 잠조 저 가리는데 ngadu lushi 하고 맥대나 하고 하면 암조냐 요 말하고 두어 잡은 되게 좀씩 맥대나 하고 말이 어쩌다 암조냐 요 가리서 류를 채는 거 시는 거 잡어서 저버리 다야로 어디 리셔를 간거 되러 시는 리셔지 왕무세 엉엉가야 나가지 엉보 수제 때문에 무슨 가
So we already defined what mind is. Awareness is defining characteristics of mind, and we kind of went through the 7 types of mind, if you will. Now the third subpoint is explicating each division or type of mind. As we said, even with direct perception, it's just not one thing, because there are different types of there are, how should I say, different examples of direct perception. Just like I say, when we say humans, right? Humans are not one kind. We can talk about humans based upon different nationalities, if you will, different gender. So like that, direct perception consists of different kinds. And so first, so direct perception is again presented under 2 subpoints: its definition and its types. Okay, so the definition of direct perception, Ngunsum, is on page 49, on number page 49, and I'll read the definition translated here. The definition of a direct perceiver is a non-mistaken knower that is free from conceptuality. Okay? So direct perception is free from conceptuality, talk about the Cheba, free from thoughts, in other words, and it is non-mistaken or unmistaken. And as Geshe explained, free from thoughts means that direct perceptions, how they arise, as we said earlier, that when they come into direct contact with their objects, whether it's a visible form or it is auditory sound, then those perceptions arise, right? If they don't come into direct contact with their objects, then they don't arise. Okay. For example, if you are completely in a pitch dark room, you are not going to see anything. Right? So for your visual perception to arise, it must come into contact with a visible form. Okay? And because the visible form will reflect on your visual perception, it arises in the aspect of that form. So this is how all other direct perceptions arise. But for thoughts, they don't have to come into contact with their objects directly, right? I mean, you can think about anything you like. They may not be true. You are daydreaming. You are kind of fabricating all kinds of thoughts, but they're still thoughts, isn't it? So therefore, direct perceptions are not thoughts. They are free from thoughts. They're free from conceptuality, if you will. And so that's important to be noticed. And so the direct perception consists of different kinds. So we can talk about where is it? Okay, before we go to different types of direct perception, now there is a difference between direct perception and direct valid perception. Okay, direct valid perception is defined as let me see, where is that definition here? Give me a second. Sometimes in the midst of all the here on page 52, somewhere in the middle, I'll read it. The definition of a direct prime cognizer, that means direct valid perception, is a new, incontrovertible, non-mistaken knower that's free from conceptuality. In other words, what has been added to the definition is that a direct valid perception has to be a prime valid cognition, a prime. It means miluva, sardo miluva, sorry. Prime valid cognition. And as Geshe explained, that in the Buddhist schools of thought, Sevatantika Madhyamika, a sub-school of the middle way school, and all the schools below, so they said that a valid cognition has to be a prime, unmistaken perception. It has to be sardu, prime, okay, newly, in other words. But according to Prasangika Madhyamika, they said, well, a direct valid perception has to be valid. It doesn't have to be prime. It doesn't have to be new, in a sense. So that's the distinction Prasangika school of thought would make. So now we go to the different types of direct perception, not direct valid perception, direct perception. The first one is, excuse me here, Ongbungwensum, which is direct sensory perception. Okay? Direct sensory perception. Yingun, direct mental perception. Rangrik, direct metacognition. Okay? Direct metacognition or self-knower, sometimes it's translated before. And then the direct yogic perception or supramundane perception. Now again, Prasangika Madhyamika does not accept Rangrik or metacognition or meta-awareness. Yeah? But all other schools do accept Rangrik or metacognition or meta-awareness. And Prasangika accepts direct sensory perception, direct mental perception, and direct yogic perception, but not direct metacognition or awareness. Let me see. So in the case of these direct perceptions, all of them must kind of come into contact with their respective objects, or objective conditions, for them to arise. But what is unique about them is that each of them has its own unique, what we call, fundamental condition, Dhargye, or empowering condition. For example, a visual perception, it depends upon, its unique, fundamental, visual faculty. That's its condition. Now, same thing with the, unique auditory faculty for the auditory perception. So each of them have its own unique fundamental or empowering faculty condition, and then the objects. So in the case of tactile consciousness, Rekcha, right? So when you wear a very fine cloth, you feel good. It's smooth on your body, isn't it? But if you wear something rough, you feel its roughness, the textile, So only your tactile consciousness can feel it, right? You cannot look at your clothes and say, like, your eye consciousness cannot feel that your cloth is smooth or rough. Your auditory perception cannot judge that your cloth is smooth or rough. It's your tactile consciousness that feels, right, that perceives the texture of your clothing. No.
Das da ongu tangji ka ta ongu til nasi khari asena in so ze wa dra ji ro ji ongu nga cha ro ti mda no sa ti chengi de khari asena ta bu sunji ongu se ya de khari asena ro tumo me da ge tumo mai be da ge si de zang da tere ka ji ga ji da de sha de ge ge me ko ra ga to ya da de de ge de la da ande kho ba si wo ti 어머 딩마디 나로 요르시데 나로 요네면 다 거기서 토야 나 나고디 대체 미마디시로 나오 어때 다티 종조서는 이네야 소통 말마 제가 투모 많이 다 괜찮습니다 다티 미히코라 투모 많이 미마데고 나외시와데 나외오모데고 저 투모 소소 레레 된거죠 근데 거기서 다 해다들 맥모야데 엄청 뭐도 여버들 망보여로 저시 가서 어디 아무것도 좀 쇼르드잖아. 얘는 맥이 속통도 말마. 내가 나기 나요 아무 좀 나요 다투 버라. 어디 아무 좀 시다 투모 마에 닥텐스도 근데 코로나기 소소소게다 셴달 맞아 코로나기 투모 마에 겨들으시고. 다 들라다다 테마타에서 이기 시바 고야디 가가 찍고야다. 투모 나게도 거기서 가가 이些甚至也有点was go了的一些小的，他们当时刚刚这个，应该这个当时一些小的嘛，一些吧小个了哇，他们买吧都说安保点下来的了，他们买当时是他没到位呢，那个他们买当时可是没话点见个，爸爸这毛这些吧的，可是我们我是没，但从小我说你生意是个了，我第一次碰上。他真的嘛，那抓的这着地了，让他们当时哪样不的，这样不绿样不这样着，我都是嘛想那说这，我应该这个吧，我这里想。
So at the bottom of page 52, you find definition of sense direct perceivers or perception. The definition of a sense direct perceiver is a non-mistaken, non-conceptual knower that is produced from its own uncommon, empowering condition of physical sense power. So once we understand that, then we can apply it to each of the sensory perceptions. As Geshe explained, so in the case of visual perception, direct perception, its unique, uncommon, empowering faculty condition is the eye sense faculty. Just to kind of simplify it, like maybe we can think of in terms of the pupils in our eyes, isn't it? If there's some defect with the pupils, then you cannot see things properly. Because then you cannot come into contact with the visible form and you cannot perceive it. So therefore, pupils it's a uncommon or unique empowering condition to give rise to the visual perception. Now we will have similar things with auditory perceptions as well. Yeah, so all the sensory perceptions must come into contact with their objects. They have different objects for sure. Each of them have their own unique, uncommon, empowering condition, such as the eye sense faculty for visual perception, ear sense faculty for the auditory perception, and so forth. Okay, but a common, condition for all of them is called Dhamma, which is very hard to translate in English, and this has always been translated this way. It's called immediately preceding condition, Dhamma. In other words, it's a mental, preceding mental condition, moments. And so depending upon those three conditions, objective condition, immediately preceding condition, uncommon, empowering fundamental condition, then, direct, sensory perceptions do arise. Okay? And so we'll stop there today. I have to write it, page 52, and we will answer any questions you have. The question that was asked is, can Geshe clarify if mind is the same as consciousness? If not, how does each function differently? Tanda kendi robata nganzo Lorig she sum tunji lai che robage. Lo dang nam she tunji la roba ta kon chi chen inji chik de chik me ro sam roba. Lo dang nam she ni di ken chi ba re ba ma re ba robage. Dang nganzo re la sa robage. Kisi chikwa mena kunyi nigi ena karsa gore chele yorwake manda be cheba karo yore lagdo ta lo da namshi sengde chikwa reves chikwa ina da digrwake chikwa meba ina and chele manda ba karo yore lo da namshi
tere karda cheba
lo da namshi number sheba namshi ni tunji rwake
number sheba sena tere da Because number he was in a similar cover. Lost in the Simpsons Ganga cover.
Namju can go to Lorig shares some twins, shares or shares, Sheba said, and Namshema said,
Lord, the river
Sheba the Namshel Kumar, Sheba the Namshel Kumar,
Ale,
Ale, Ale. Lorig share some things la gurba. Ale ani chata lo da ge nam shela kar ke bar chana.
Lo da nam shi ni da do sin musum yes den dige da.
No so.
Nam shi lo me cha lo nam shi ma cha si ro wa.
No so.
Ko ni da di cha chu karsa. Ti kho de chu da du shi de bu sim su de yo ro.
No.
Wo de cha shi.
Ale nam she so sim ji ko de gorda.
La.
Nam she la de so sim ji ko de gorda.
Nam shi de zo dong ko.
No so.
Nam ba shi ba si.
No. So I think the question asked is, can Geshe clarify if mind is the same as consciousness? If not, how does each one function differently? I wonder whether this is the challenge because of English translations, not only mine, but in the latest book too. The Tibetan word for law, which we translated as mind, yeah, and Ripa as awareness. Sheba, we translate as consciousness. Maybe that's where it becomes problematic. I think maybe we have to translate probably Sheba as perception. So let's say mind, awareness, and perceptions are synonyms according to Tibetan. Lorig, she, sum, Tunji. Okay. Now Namshe, which is mostly translated as consciousness, is a different type. Usually when we say consciousness, according to Tibetan number Sheba, it has to be a primary consciousness, a primary perception, if you will. Okay, so if we look at the relationship between mind and primary consciousness, or let's say consciousness as primary, okay, that primary consciousnesses are mind; they are part of the mind. But every instance of a mind is not necessarily primary consciousness. Yeah, for example, all the mental factors. Which we will talk about footnote later on, right? Mental factors such as what we call intention or discriminative awareness. These are minds, but these are not consciousness. These are not primary consciousnesses. Okay, so we will talk about I think what each of these mental factor is and their functions like later on as we go through this text. Okay, I hope that answers your question. So the Tibetan term law translated as mind, Ripa as awareness, and Sheba as perception now. So these are regarded as synonyms or Tunji, and number Sheba as consciousness, so which is usually understood as a primary or principal mind. Okay, and let me double check if there are any more questions here. If mind and consciousness are synonymous, why are there different words or terms? Alada ko di lago reke. Pena lo da riba da sheba de ke tunji ina ro ge. And dinde ne tunji ina ne sik da me da mangbo ne so ga ka re la ming ro ge. To da ne sik ba chi ro ge. And lo sik sha shin de ro ge. Ya riba se la ya sheba se la dinde la ka chi go re so da. Tunji le ya sik da me da ming yong.
Today, Chala do check the Ming Moyo, Missula Ming Moyo, Ming Mo Tasuro, Tell a Mama Yora.
In Taco Quebec, you said at the Karina, so
Mingosa Doja Kodoba, lots in the lots in the repat to that, Yula Juba to repass it is a loss it is on the same goes on the middle. Repass it is on Yul Juba to Shagova says the go Pemba Najimaiba. Go Sheba mother does so Kona Yul say out the Bible.
No, Sheba said no, so. So the follow-up question is, if mind and consciousness are synonyms, why are different words or terms? I think the different terms are used like to give us a slightly different sense of, right? We're talking about the same thing. It's just like one person with different names, right? But it all is the same person, right? But each of their name might reflect a different sort of a feature, if you will, right? So that's why we say lo is mind, we say ripa is awareness, so it might give a little different sense of the same thing, and then we say sheba is perception. Okay, so it's just like one thing can be called by different names in the same language, and of course then different names in the many languages, so that's how it is.
Geshe Gyeltsen.
No.
Same do so. The go Thoda ji wa the Doja Kha yero.
No.
When Karsa the Hija did look Hiba River. He just did same here, the zero.
No.
And Yuba said the same to us. Doja here to Thoda ji wa.
No.
The turned the digital Ming Mingana the Mamboy.
So in the Buddhist text, you will come across, many similar things. We might use different terms or terminologies, slightly giving different sort of sense of the same thing, but referring all to the same thing. Another example Geshe given is, we can say yoba, existence. Okay? But then it's also called object of knowledge. Okay? And sheja, and then sheja, object of comprehension. But they're all regarded as synonyms. Right? Existence is something established by a valid perception. So it gives you that sense, what existence means, yoba in Tibetan. And object of knowledge means that there's a knower, right, that kind of engages with that object. And object of comprehension means, again, the perception that comprehends something. So it's all of them are different terms referring to the same thing, but might give you a little different sense of the same thing. So we will stop there today, and we will continue next week. And I think so today, as you know, it's a full moon day, and our monks will do the Vajravidaran dissolution ritual at 3, and also they said on the Lama Tsongkhapa Day, December 10th, which is actually also the Nobel Peace Prize Day for His Holiness and other things. So they will start the next mandala, which is the Vajrapani mandala creation. Okay, so we're giving a heads up to you. Hello. But that question, sorry, I didn't understand. It says, is consciousness going to next life as mean? So I don't know what it means, really.
Mind, I mean, saying mind.
Oh, is consciousness going to next life as mind? Okay. Okay, if that's what, okay, mind, okay. Thank you for clarifying it. I'll check with Geshe. This is again. They don't want to inside that. I am a pebble ming yarmendo. The number share, but the Kawashuma chamber, Kawachin Namshi to go over. Namshi to do a same day to go over, so the same day for down. Yeah. That's right. When we say that consciousness goes from one life to the next life, which is rebirth, so it's the same as saying that the mind goes from one life to the next life. So consciousness and mind in this context are synonym or tunji. Okay, same thing. So thank you for clarifying your question.